Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar hosted by Better Business Bureau. I am Allie Schmidt, Marketplace Manager at your local Better Business Bureau. Today we have the opportunity to hear from Corey Bevis, who is the lead safety consultant at Washington State Department of Labor and Industries. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please type them in the question section and Corey will be able to address them during the webinar. And lastly, we have a special addition to today's webinar. Todd Shepard, the owner of Shepard & Shepard Business Solutions, has written a book titled Insuring Your Auto Shop, What Every Auto Body and Service Shop Owner Should Know. The book features a couple chapters on understanding insurance for garage operations, insurance terminology, and there's a full chapter on risk management and loss prevention itself. Todd has so graciously offered to give a free copy to all attendees of today's webinar that would be interested in his book. So any interested parties can contact Todd Shepard by email, and that's todd@shepquote.com for their free copy. Shepard & Shepard Business Solutions is an accredited business, and they are A+ rated with Better Business Bureau. And they're based out of Kennewick, Washington. So that's really great. We appreciate your kindness, Todd Shepard. And now with all of that out of the way, I would like to introduce everyone to Corey Bevis. Thank you all for joining us, and the presentation is now yours.
All right, great. Thank you, Allie. As Allie said, my name is Corey Bevis. I currently work for Labor and Industries out of our Tacoma office. I've been in Seattle for almost, about 9 years in Seattle, and this is my first year in Tacoma. So 10 years doing working for the department. Started off as a compliance officer, where I went out and inspected a lot of businesses, construction companies, unannounced, and got to issue citations and penalties and all that. But now, I really enjoy my job as a consultant, where I get to come out and be invited out and help employers meet the safety and health requirements without having to penalize them. So it's been pretty great. Central Washington University graduate. I worked at Les Schwab for a while, so I actually worked in a shop. I worked for a construction company, having a great time with the department. And as you said earlier, I'm a Tacoma now and been in Seattle for pretty much all the time before that. So what we have here is a presentation. So I put together a presentation called Tips and Tools for Automotive Shop Safety. What I'm hoping is that you guys can kind of pull some ideas from this and kind of what I expect to see in any shop that I go into. And these are requirements for basically for every shop. So everything I talk about here is something I'm expecting to see in place, and also some of the tips that I can kind of bring up to help employers be in compliance with all the rules. So let's see, let's move on to the next slide here. So we've got some of the general objectives. I'm going to start with some of the employers and employees' responsibilities for safety. Yes, employees have some of the share in making sure that the shop is safe. They have some rules they have to follow. We're going to talk about identifying safety responsibilities or safety requirements and some of the common hazards that I've seen in some of the shops. Some of the ideas for abatement and ways that you can mitigate or abate some of the hazards that we come across, and discuss short-term and long-term injuries common to mechanics. We'll talk about some of the injuries that may be common and maybe cause problems, and a little bit about risk management as well. So with that, let's talk about employers versus employees' responsibilities. Basically, employers, your first requirement is as soon as an employee works for you, whether it's a long-term employee, first day on the job, you're required to provide employees with a safe workplace free from recognized hazards that are causing or are likely to cause serious injury or death. There's a little more information there. I also threw in what the employees' requirements are, which are to study and follow all safe practices. So as it says right there, employees are required to follow all of the rules. So later on in the slide, I talk about what is required in a safety program. There's about 8 or 9 required elements in what we call an accident prevention program. All employers are required to have it. all employees are required to have an orientation to that program. And one of the most important things is, how and when to report injuries and the disciplinary process, documentation, things like that. So I'll kind of go into some of that. Why don't we go ahead and go to the next slide here. So what I like about this slide is with this slide and the next one, I talk about some of the things I find that aren't in the codes so much, but I think that are really good practices. So as you can see in the picture, poor housekeeping. I think, having good housekeeping and a clean shop and procedures for daily cleaning of the floors, cleaning up water, cleaning up spills, cleaning up oil is very important. I remember working at Les Schwab, we're running around all the time, going to the tire changing bay, back and forth the vehicles, and more than a few times did I see guys sliding backwards and just smack, some pretty bad accidents because we wouldn't take the time to squeegee up the water or clean up oil or whatnot. That stuff's important. You can have some terrible injuries if you're not keeping up on your housekeeping. With shops, in the automotive shop, I see more of cords laying across the floor, maybe pneumatic air lines on the ground, jack stands sitting out, tools, wrenches, things like that sitting on the floor that just are not a good practice. And I'm sure a lot of the guys have seen people slip, trip, and fall, or slips, trips, and falls from a lot of that stuff. This is a pretty bad picture here of a shop, but okay. So after that, housekeeping and damaged tools. It's like it's you want to have. It's kind of, I think of like in the kitchen. A sharp knife is more safe than a dull knife. It's kind of the same thing. Damaged tools can be missing guards, bad electrical cords on them, just anything that's broken or damaged can potentially in the long run end up in an injury. So you want to keep up on your tools. Exposed electrical, a lot of the times jack stands and things like that will roll over power cords. The pneumatic lifts might come down and pinch cords and things like that. You want to make sure that all your insulation, all your strain relief where the cord plugs into the wall, whether it gets pulled on or whatever, sometimes that exposes the interior wires. You want to make, those are all violations. Those all have to be corrected. Can lead to injuries, electrical hazards. Lockout, tag out of all your lifts and equipment. One of the things I want to talk about with lockout, tag out is if you guys are working on some of the new hybrids and vehicles, there's procedures and requirements to lock out the electrical system so that when you're working on that, you don't, there's a lot of voltage and things going through those. So there's procedures for doing that. Make sure that you're wearing your required electrical gloves and things like that. And you got to replace them and make sure they're in good condition. But also lock out, tag out the automotive hoists and lifts so that they're locked out in place if you're having to service or work on those so that they don't come down on people. Let's see, lack of training. I see a lot of that, with new employees, with whether it's not knowing that they have to wear eye protection when using a bench grinder, cutting with a torch or welding and things like that. That requires a lot of training to do safely, to do properly. All employees are required to basically be trained on any equipment that you guys are having to use, whether proper procedures for hoisting up a vehicle on a lift, to, like I said, welding, to using a bench grinder, to using a cutoff saw, to using a chop saw. These things you're required to train your employees on how to do that. And so what I see a lot of times is, the guy who's been in the shop for 10 years, he knows that stuff. But if it's the new kid out of high school, maybe a tough kid or whatever, but he may not know proper use of a chop saw or how to properly use a grinder, or that with a grinder that you have to wear eye protection. You got to train in that, and that's where we find a lot of the injuries. You have to train these guys.
Well, and they could probably also have known maybe from their own home shop how to use some of the things, but they're not knowing the safety standards of the industry.
Exactly, and we do have a lot of more stringent things than people are gonna maybe be aware of at home.
So instead of just asking them if they're trained, making sure that you train them yourself so you know Sure.
Yes, it's an absolute requirement. And when it one of the things is that I like to be pretty thorough when I go through a shop, especially on training. If you do have an injury and say you have an amputation of a finger, well, L&I is going to come out and do the investigation. And one of the things is, did you train that employee on how to use that saw? You want to be able to answer, yes, I did train that employee, not just to potentially get out of a citation, but so that the inspector will say, okay, we understand that you're trying to do your best. You can't prevent everything, but at least I don't have to issue you a citation for not training them. That's, of course you want to keep a place safe, but you also want to try and keep out of citations as well. And you want to be able to document your training. I'm going to talk a little bit about that on the accident prevention program requirements. Let's see, workload and deadlines. I see this a lot of the times. If you're stacking up too much work for employees to get done in a day, yes, you might have a great job. They may be, pumping out a lot of work, getting a lot done, but you also have to take into account safety. It takes a long time. Safety, to do a job safely and within the WAC requirements, it takes time and it takes money. To allow for if you're grinding Bondo or if you're painting, the guy's got to have the proper respirators, changing out the proper respirators. You got to take time to wear eye protection, to have the guards on the tools. It's just workload and deadlines. I put that in there just to say that you need to allow time for the job to be done safely and account for that. Walking and working surfaces is kind of just about keeping your floors clean, keeping the water off the ground, keeping the oil cleaned up. Trip hazards have to be cleaned up, picked up. Let's see, complacency is probably where I get a lot of time with the old timers. You don't know how many times I go into shops and, I've been doing this since you've been in diapers. Great, that's great. I understand that. I'm telling you what is black and white in our codes and what you have to do to meet the requirements. And keep in mind, as a consultant, I love working with employers, but I don't like leaving there thinking that I didn't do a thorough enough job, because compliance can follow me in at another day. Say you have an injury, which would then result in an inspection, and Corey didn't tell us about these requirements, or we didn't follow Corey's recommendations, and now you're going to issue us a citation for not having a chip guard on our bench grinder or a tool rest or whatever it might be. So that's, so I'm just there to help employers understand what the requirements are and what you have to do. Yes, I understand that people have been doing this for years and years and years, but that's why I put complacency in there, because you may have been doing it, I don't want to say incorrectly, but you may not have been meeting the safety requirements for the last 25 years you've been doing it. So I get that a lot in shops, basically almost every shop I go to. I'm not trying to, at least one, right. Capping your, I'm just looking at this picture here. You want to look with your welding tanks and things like that. You want to keep your caps on your remove the regulators, put your caps on. Also kind of makes me think of pneumatic air lines in a shop. We've got what we call OSHA approved air nozzles. So if you're using air to clean or blow off things, the nozzle has to have a baffle on it to where if it goes against your skin, the air gets diverted sideways and not blowing an air bubble in your bloodstream. So we check for OSHA approved air nozzles. It's either you can if you have an air nozzle and it's used over 30 psi, you have to either have the baffle on it, or you can drill a hole through the nozzle to where the air will divert sideways if it hits your skin. 2 ways to meet the rules there. Those are a lot of the things that I like to be pretty picky on, and to make sure that the shops are in compliance on. Just trying to think of some of the other requirements that we'll see what I come across, or we'll see what I come up with. So lack of management support. What I think of there is management not buying the proper safety equipment. When I pull an employee aside and talk to them about what's actually in place, a lot of the times they won't buy the OSHA approved air nozzles, or they didn't train them on the material safety data sheets or the SDS sheets on chemical safety. They didn't provide respirators for painting or dust masks for grinding Bondo or whatever it might be. A lot of times it's not hard to find out. It's not hard to find out from an employee talking to them if management is not supporting safety. So, and keep in mind that we get calls in the department for a lot of little safety issues An employee has a right to call L&I and file a complaint. We get wives that call. We get dads that call saying, hey, my son works in an automotive shop and he's working under an automotive lift, and he's been noticing that the lift kind of ratchets down and doesn't lock all the time. You know, that's a very valid complaint. If management doesn't want to replace that $10,000 lift, you know, that could be a huge safety issue. Why don't we go on to the next one? So this one, and we talked about some of the potential citations already, but I just wanted to bring some of these up. So eyewash station, yes, basically, I don't think I've found an automotive shop that does not require an eyewash. Most shops, what I find, have eye flush. That's that little bottle, or they have an eye flush. Yeah, an eye flush. The little bottle that goes with your first aid kit is not an eye wash. An eye wash station is required to flow for 15 minutes. So you either have a plumb in. The eye wash station is required whenever you have a chemical that says on the safety part of it, if you get this chemical in your eyes, you require it to be rinsed out for 15 minutes. That little bottle in your first aid kit does not meet that requirement. That's when we look for the plumbed in eye wash station or the mounted on the wall eye wash station itself. It's a big box. It's got full of liquid. You open it up and it sprays like a little shower on your eyes. So you have to be able to flush your eyes for 15 minutes. Generally we'll see the one that's plumbed in. You have to turn those on. I believe it's monthly. You have to make sure that bowl right there where the sprinkler thing comes up, it's not dirty, full of dirt. We check that to make sure that you're cleaning it, testing it monthly, so that if you had to stick your eyes in it and actually wash your eyes out, that it's clean and ready to go. Just like fire extinguishers, all shops are required to have fire extinguishers. They've got to have a sign above it that says fire extinguisher, so it's identified. It's got to be clearly accessible, and in a lot of shops, this can be a housekeeping thing. You have to be able to get to your fire extinguisher without tripping over anything. Your fire extinguisher has got to be inspected and certified by a certified professional annually. So the fire department or whatever fire service you hire to come in, they will service it and check your fire extinguishers annually. They generally provide the tag on there to say, yes, we've inspected this. When you flip that tag over, that's where you can document your monthly inspections. So all shops are required. So we require that you inspect your fire extinguishers monthly. The code actually says you inspect them monthly. You don't have to document it, but it's a good way to prove that you are doing it by documenting it on the back of that little tag. And I find that one all the time. So when you're doing a fire extinguisher inspection, make sure that the little gauge is in the green, that it's not dripping anything from the nozzle, that you can get to it if you need to, that it's just usable if you have to. Okay. That also reminds me of electrical panels. You have to be able to get to your electrical panels, 3 feet of clearance. When you open up your electrical panel, make sure there's no missing breakers. A lot of these shops that have been there for a while, you'd be surprised. You open those things up and there's like missing breakers in there, nothing's labeled, can't access the panel, things like that. Those are all serious violations that you get fined a lot of money for. So I like to be pretty thorough on those as well. So next one is lockout, tag out on high voltage batteries and vehicles when you're working on the hybrids, slips, trips, and falls we talked about. Hearing protection when you're operating pneumatic tools or whatever the case may be. You know, we have, I believe the threshold is 85 decibels for time-weighted average. If you're over that, you're required to provide hearing protection. A lot of shops do meet that threshold, so a lot of them are required to have that. Let's see, OSHA approved air nozzles, I talked about those, rated pneumatic lines. So with that, I always check the lines, your air lines, whatever lines that you're using from your air compressor in the back of the shop that runs to the front, you've got to have rated air lines. You can't just have a PVC pipe. What I want to see is metal piping. You can have PVC if it's got the rating on the exterior of the pipe. It'll say how much PSI that can hold. Otherwise, we've had issues of those lines exploding, and some of them aren't rated. So you've got to have the properly rated piping, and that can be expensive, to plumb that stuff in. That's, one of management's commitment is that's one of the ways I can assess if if they're actually meeting a lot of the safety requirements, is checking a lot of these things and seeing where you're at, because that could be, that could be spending. So pneumatic lines, proper rated engine lift chains. I think these things are about $300 for the required. You cannot just use a chain from the junkyard or from the back of your truck to hoist an engine. And so it's probably a shock to a lot of people. I see that all the time. You have to have a rated chain with a tag on it that says the capacity of what this, so you have an engine lift and a chain. So this thing's got to have, just like in construction, whenever you're hoisting equipment or any kind of pick, it's a chain that's got the hooks on it, and at the top it'll have a tag of the different configurations of picking and what the rated capacity of that chain is. What we a lot of times see is, and I'm sure the guys know, any type of configuration of lifting stuff, any old chain on the ground or slings, or a lot, you have to order and use a properly rated chain. Those can be expensive. I find that a lot of times, and you don't want to get a citation for not having a rated chain. Those things it can be dangerous, because if your engines are pretty heavy, and we've had fatalities where those fail, employees under it and things like that. Junkyards a lot of times don't have the proper lifting slings or chains.
Right.
And, they're hoisting engines out of cars and things with something that's not made to do that job. So anyway,
best case scenario, even if it doesn't hurt any of the employees, if it falls and it fails, then you have to explain to your client.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that we used a $10 chain from Home Depot to lift your motor, and sorry, we broke your motor.
That wouldn't be fun either.
Okay, so carbon monoxide. This can be an expensive deal too. So if you're in a shop, sometimes you need to have, if you're having vehicles run on the inside of a shop, you have a lot of buildup of carbon monoxide. There's a threshold for that. You could be in violation of that. We get complaints from employees calling about that a lot. That can require ventilation and systems to ventilate that exhaust out of your shop. Auto lift certifications. So on your automotive lift that I talked about, there's a certification that goes on there where a professional has to come in. I believe it's annual. So that a professional has inspected this lift, make sure that it's serviced properly and that it works, that it locks out. When it comes down, it's locked. I always check for that. And also with another thing I thought of is your jack stands must have the rated capacity posted on the side, whether it's a 2-ton jack stand, a 3-ton. It's got to say on anything that holds up an automobile how much that little device is capable of holding. We have to, the employee has to know if this is a huge 1-ton truck, you don't want to be using a weak jack, or if it's an RV, is this jack stand that you're using strong enough to hold up the back end of that RV? You have to be able to know that. So let's see, welding tank safety, and I got a little picture there. Welding tanks, have got to be secured. If you're not using it, it's got to have the cap on top. Remove the regulators. If you're storing flammables, you got to have them, the tanks. You got to have them separated by 20 feet, or I believe it's a 1-hour safety wall in between. If you've got oxygen over here and acetylene stored over here, keep them 20 feet apart, chained to the wall so that they don't tip over. That's just some of the basics for welding tank safety. So let's go to the next one. So abatement methods. So these are some of the things that you have to, machine guarding's the last one, there you go. So abatement methods. So these are some of the things that you have to have in place and kind of have in order to help with some of these issues that we're talking about. Apply the core rules. So 296-800. Every time I'm done with a shop, with a management or whatever, we sit down and we go to L&I's website and we talk about, I show them where I'm pulling these requirements from. For all industries other than construction, we start with the core rules. That talks about having an accident prevention program, having safety meetings. It'll talk about fire extinguishers, stairs safety. It'll talk about material safety data sheets, just the basics for a building, whether it's a shop, McDonald's, Starbucks, just some of the basics. That's when we start. That's the core rules. Your accident prevention program. As soon as you have one employee, and I do go into this a little bit here in a minute, you're required to have an accident prevention program, safety committees, or safety meetings, depending on how many employees you have. You can elect to have or you can have a safety committee if you have 11 or more employees. We don't expect that you have everybody meet monthly. You can then opt to have a safety committee where you have representatives. You know, if you're Boeing, you don't expect that everybody stops work and meets for a safety meeting. So you can elect to have management or you can elect to have representatives of different departments meet how often you guys think you need to. We recommend at least quarterly, and then management as well has to participate in that and kind of run the safety committee. You know, there's requirements for that, and I cover that with the shops. Provide training on all the different hazards they're exposed to. We talked about a lot of them already. First aid certified employees. Yes, you're required to have a first aid certified employee. The code says within close proximity to a medical facility or hospital, you're required to have somebody on all shifts first aid certified. So if you're really close to it, in some of the cases, sometimes they are. If you're really close to a hospital or something like that, yeah, you can make the argument that, you know, if Allie cuts her finger off on the lift, if the lift comes down and chops her finger off, we can just run her right next door to the hospital. A lot of times that's not the case. You're going to want to have first aid certified employees, because if you're in downtown Seattle or Renton or Auburn or whatever it might be, and you've got 4 o'clock, it's traffic, you've got traffic out there, you've got bridges.
There's another accident on the
Another
road.
accident. Yeah, you always, rarely do I not require a shop to have somebody first aid certified on all shifts.
Right.
It's just a good idea.
And is there another number? Maybe is there 2, depending on, would there be 2 required depending on how many employees there are on shift at a time?
Not based on number of employees. Okay. It's just if
per shift.
Per shift, yeah. If you have a night shift, somebody on night shift has to be certified until the end of the day. Somebody has to be able to provide first aid help if necessary.
Right.
Machine guarding is just like I talked about, you know, with your bench grinders, your angle grinders, your welding, your trying to think of some other machine guarding issues in the shop. You know, you might have chop saws, band saws, lathes, chip guards on a lathe. You know, we're not talking CNC machines generally in a shop, but there's a lot of guarding on those. But mainly just lathes, bench grinders, angle grinders, things like that. They're all required to be guarded. So let's move past that one. Where are we at here? Okay, so this is the slide that talks about accident prevention program. So when I talk to management about what kind of safety program they have in place, sometimes they've got elements of a program, but then you start asking about, you know, do you document what to do in case of emergency, who to contact, is management's phone number in there? If Allie's working the night shift and you get hurt, do you know who to call and who to report to? Is there an accident reporting form in there? Does that safety program spell out the use and care of personal protective equipment? Does it tell you that when you're welding to wear a face shield and eye protection when you're using a bench grinder and things like that? These are some of the things that have to be spelled out in the safety program. On there I've got make sure that it meets these minimum requirements. So you do have to have, for example, you have to have a statement. We here at ABC Shop value the safety of our employees and value that we go home each day with all the, you know, whatever it is, signed by the highest person in the company. Basically, the president has to sign that policy statement. That's required in every safety program. And then it has to have a description of your program and on-the-job orientation. Every single employee working in a shop, when I go through there, whether it's the guy, if it's your first day on the job, if it's your 25th year, you have to show me your signature on a orientation that you have signed, that you've been oriented to this company's accident prevention program, showing that you know all the rules and all the safety requirements for your job, including the disciplinary program. Every company has to have a disciplinary program. We have a really great safety programs online, and one of the things I like to do is when we're done, I show companies where to look up all these rules, but also all the free resources that we have on how to download this safety program. It meets all the required elements, and it's easy to just download, tailor it to your shop, put your shop information in there, address, phone numbers, names, titles, all that stuff in there. We provide an orientation page for each employee to go through. We provide safety meeting documentation for you, safety audit documentation, all that stuff is in there.
And this is all with a free console.
Yeah, it's all, yeah, I can download all this stuff for you for free, and I show employers how to do that, how to meet all these safety requirements. So we have a lot of information on our website. We've got forklift safety training programs, we've got ladder safety programs, personal protective equipment safety programs, all the stuff that I'm going to look for in your shop, I can download for free on you from our website, and that's pretty important. Yeah, it's important for employers to know. You know, your safety bulletin boards, for example, I get a lot of questions about that. All that required information on the safety bulletin board, we can download those posters that say your rights as a worker and minimum wage, all that stuff. That's all free. It's provided on our website. Let's see, did I miss anything about accident prevention program other than you just have to have all those elements. Sometimes shops come up with their own safety programs, but as long as they meet those requirements. Excuse me. So this is just something that the department puts out. This is a what we call, this is a hazard alert. I remember, I don't know, it was about 2006 or so, a couple fatalities regarding employees changing tires. I remember one pretty sad story where a kid was changing a semi-truck tire, I believe it was on the side of Highway 18 or out on the side of a freeway, and it was a split rim, which was kind of a certain configuration. The tire popped off of the wheel and it killed this kid, which, we've got tire changing cages and things like that if you're changing a split rim tire or, a certain type of
super small instance of something like that happening.
Exactly. So we send out some of these hazard alerts, and it's by our SHARP program, which I believe is called Safety and Health. I'm not even sure what that acronym stands for. I think it says on there.
Safety and Health Administration Research for Prevention.
Right, Research for Prevention. So they issue some hazard alerts, and you can look these up on our website. This one's actually pretty cool. It talks about demounting and mounting procedures for tube type truck and bus tires. And I believe it's something to do with a split rim as well, but there's some good details on there. There's some other of these hazard alerts regarding welding safety, some things that have happened in the industry, and so they end up issuing those, and they're pretty useful.
And is there a way for someone that is a shop owner or an employee to sign up to receive these, or is it just always available online?
I believe it's always available. I'd have to look into that. I'm not sure. I don't know how much we end up sending out to employers. We don't want to overload employers, but there may be some way on there. I'm not sure that you can maybe sign up for hazard alerts or something. I'm not quite sure.
But definitely worth checking out the website.
Yeah. Let's move. So with that, let's kind of move on to. So we're kind of getting toward the end here. What I've got here is. What I'll start with is that we do offer other services. So what I do is safety, which is the physical hazards in a shop. We've also got risk managers that come out and they can talk about the financial side and the financial impact of having claims and injuries, how to best get employers back to work or injured employees back to work, how to have your light duty job descriptions ready to go, have your return to work policies and procedures in place. All that stuff's important. I go into some detail about it if employers ask me, but what I focus on is physical hazards. Risk managers focus on some of this stuff. We've also got the other discipline we have is industrial hygienists, which they do the respiratory hazards, the hearing hazards, the hazard communication program, which has to do with chemicals and chemical exposures and things like that. They specialize in that. And anytime I come through, especially in an automotive shop, I always recommend that, okay, I'll be done with my safety portion of this. Next, I'm going to have a risk manager and an industrial hygienist call you as well. It's free to work with them too. And keep in mind, as a consultant, what I say is generally that it's free to work with me. It's confidential. One of the requirements is that you share my report with your employees on your safety bulletin board or whatever. You're going to receive my report. It'll come on state letterhead. It'll have my signature, and it'll spell out these are the findings that I found in the shop. If there's any uncorrected hazards, you have to write back to me on methods of correction. We agree on how much time you need to get that corrected. Like I said, you post that on your safety bulletin board so your employees have the right to see what L&I found as they came through. Anyhow, so we have risk managers, and they talk about, like I said, the financial side of it. They can really benefit employers on getting employees back to work on proactively. Let's have this stuff in place before somebody gets hurt, so that when you do get that call, an employee going to a hospital, whatever, you can have your light duty job description options ready to go. So you don't want to have somebody sit at home for a month because they lost a finger or whatever. That employee's injured, let's get them taken care of, but that doesn't mean that they can't come to work and help you out with do something. Let's get them back to work. Let's get them still help, contributing to the workforce, which they can in a lot of different ways. So anyhow, so let's maybe go to the next slide here. I think we are almost getting to the end. An experience factor is something that's kind of important. So it's almost like automotive insurance. Every business starts or has an experience factor, and that is the number. So every employee, it's what you pay per hour per employee for industrial insurance premiums.
Okay.
Kind of like automotive insurance, you start out at a certain rate. We start out each employer when they're brand new at 1.0. If you perform poorly in safety and you have injuries and things like that, your rate will go up 1 point something. Say you get to 1.5, you're then paying 50% more than an average company in your industry per hour. If your insurance rates per employee is $2 an hour, well, if you have 1.5, you're not paying $3 an hour, which employees also have a little portion of that they have to pay out of their paycheck. So the better you perform safety-wise, more money you can save.
And you're more attractive for hiring as well.
Yeah,
so an employee would be more apt to go to your company when you're paying less insurance, because they essentially are going to be paying less. Yes. Very neat. Good to know. And
let's see. So how long can an injury caused by the workplace stay on the employer's experience factor? And it's 3 years. So that rate, whether it goes up or down, stays there for 3 years.
Oh. That is daunting.
I know,
something were to happen.
So let's go to the last slide here. And so this is DOSH consultation. So maybe I didn't clarify earlier. DOSH is Washington State's equivalent to OSHA. We're the Division of Occupational Safety and Health under the Department of Labor and Industries. We're free. It's confidential. We're out consultants or come out to your place of business by invite only. We don't issue citations or penalties, but you are required to correct anything that I identified during my walkthrough. You will get a report that spells out all my findings. The letter explains the findings and follow-up of all serious hazards. Basically, you do have to write back to me on how you corrected things. Sometimes I come back to the shop if you want me to, or if there's an issue, we need to figure out something to get something corrected, I can do that. I should address 2 questions that we had earlier. One of them was whether or not employees are required to have steel toe boots, and the other question was, let's see, something I believe if you can wear headphones in a shop.
No. Are employees able to wear headphones in the shop?
And the reason I kind of wanted to save this for last, because they're good questions. We don't have a code specifically addressing either one of those. We have one thing, what I'll say is that we have what you're required to do. Employers are required to have a job hazard analysis. What that is you're required to explain what the job is, what the hazards are, and how you're going to mitigate that. So say if you're welding, the hazards are potential fire, potential respiratory, potential burns, and things like that. The mitigation, the way you're going to fix it is have leather gloves, shield, the tinting shield, and all that stuff to prevent sparks and things from falling on you. With the headphones, employers, we would look to an employer's accident prevention program to see whether or not you allow it. Because in some jobs, in a shop, maybe it wouldn't be a huge deal, but you wouldn't necessarily want the guy, there are instances where it would be.
Right.
And you'd want the employer to spell out, no, we do not allow headphones, period. And I see that a lot of times. A lot of employers will say, no, we don't allow headphones. Our L&I codes don't say headphones or not. That one we'd have to look to an employer's accident prevention program under the job hazard analysis to spell out whether or not they allow that. I wouldn't recommend it. Same thing with steel toe boots. We refer to ANSI, which is the they test safety materials. They test shoes for slip resistance, puncture resistance, things like that, chemical resistance. Employers may say, yes, we have a lot of heavy lifting hazards. If you're pulling engines out of cars, we require that you meet safety requirements for our shop, which is, yes, you have to have steel toes. And I do see that a lot as well. L&I, Labor and Industry, says we refer to your safety program for that. So it can be a tough one because not all positions in a shop would require steel toe, but I would recommend it for the guys who are lifting heavy equipment, hoisting engines out and things like that.
If there's potential in your shop for an injury, if you weren't equipped with the proper shoes, or if you did have earphones in, that goes back to your whole idea of the injury. If there's an injury on the job and that could affect you for 3 years, let's say,
let's just
play it safe. I mean,
just play it safe.
You're leaving it up to the owner,
right?
But
and so in that the steel toe question and the headphone question, we don't specifically address in the safety requirements. That's up to the shop. So, and I should say that all safety, eye protection, hearing protection, hard hats, things like that are all required to be provided by the employer. Steel toes are something that we probably wouldn't require the employer to provide unless it was job specific. It would kind of be something we'd have to talk about. That's a good question.
If you had a full-time position, maybe in your shop that was constantly working with something that would
we wouldn't
put them in.
We wouldn't require an employer. Yes, we require an employer to provide eye protection for everybody because that's just industry standard. Steel toe boots, we don't necessarily require that. The employer would have to provide that for everybody. If you have one or two guys, maybe it would be a different story, but it's kind of something we'd have to talk about. So with that, you guys, that's just some of the main things for automotive shop safety, and I think hopefully that was some of the best practices and things that I expect to see in a shop when we go out there. Some of that can cost a lot of money, but I think it's probably a lot of things that you guys are probably that the shops are already doing. And I love working with employers that are willing to go the extra mile and kind of put some of this stuff in place and just provide a good employee morale. You can tell them when shops are doing it right, when things are going well, safety's going well. So.
And I think what's interesting too that you mentioned about the end consultation that you do, where you discuss, preventative and maybe here are the things that are not working right or that you do need to work on, and working on a plan to figure out the timing and how much time is given in order to do that to end up with compliance. And I feel like if I was a shop owner, and maybe some of you guys that are listening, if you feel like, maybe this consultation is just a way to get them in the door so that we can get in trouble. When not at all. That's not at all what it is.
That's a very good question. There's a couple ways to get compliance, like I used to do, issue citations and things like that. That's what you want to avoid.
Absolutely.
You want to have us in as consultation. And it is, no, I do not talk to compliance. It's confidential. The last thing I want is to invite or have compliance at your shop after I've worked with you. And that's why I'm very thorough on things, because I will get the call from either you or have the compliance officer call me when they show up saying, hey, Corey, I'm at this shop. And I'm like, is there something that I missed when I was there that you're seeing?
You're invested.
Right. Exactly. And I'm about at least 50-50 or better on getting the guy to move on because I want to make sure that I'm thorough when I'm there, because that's the last thing I want to do is receive a phone call for something I overlooked. It's kind of a win-win for everybody. It does take some dedication from a management point of view, but the idea is to provide a safe workplace and to not, it's to prevent injuries, to have good morale in the shop, and to get things taken care of.
Very neat. pretty incredible. All right, well, I think that's all we have for today. We haven't received any more questions. So thank you all for participating in today's webinar, and thank you again to Corey from Washington State Department of L&I, Labor and Industries. I hope you all have a great day, and please feel free to contact BBB with any further questions at 206-431-2227. Thank you.